Across the galaxy, stories were whispered about planets where even war machines did not survive. Places ruled by apex creatures so deadly that entire species refused to land there. And this fear was exactly why the royal fleet existed, trained to hunt, contain, and study these giant alien predators so the galaxy could sleep without nightmares. On this day, Princess Lyra stood aboard the flagship, her heart racing under her armor, because this was her first real mission, her first step into danger, her first chance to prove she was more than a royal title. She wanted respect, she wanted honor, she wanted to show she was brave, and everyone watched her with curious eyes, waiting to see if the princess was strong or just another fragile royal pretending to be a warrior. She tried to hide her nerves as she stepped into the briefing chamber, where officers saluted her, but she caught the way some smirked quietly, thinking she was only here because of her bloodline, not because she earned it. She lifted her chin, refusing to break. She would prove them wrong. Commander Ryan spoke loudly, pointing to a massive hologram of the mission target. A forbidden planet called Virex 9, a world swallowed by dense forests and towering mountains, crawling with apex predators that had wiped out every previous expedition. The room fell silent when he said, "This is the deadliest zone in the sector. No mercy. No mistakes." Lyra felt a thrill of fear mixed with excitement. This was her chance. She wanted to jump into the mission headfirst. But then the commander continued, "Princess Lyra will be assigned an assistant to ensure her safety." She tensed. She didn't want protection. She wanted responsibility. But when the door opened, and she saw who stepped inside, confusion washed over her. It wasn't a strong soldier or trained guard. It was a boy, maybe 19, quiet, slim, dressed in a plain mechanic's uniform. His eyes were calm, almost too calm, like still water. His name tag simply said Jace. No rank, no title, no medals, nothing. A nobody. The room erupted in soft laughter, muffled, but unmistakable. Officers exchanged smirks. One whispered, "A human apprentice? Is this a joke?" Another snorted, "Humans are extinct in every real sense, weak, useless, forgotten." Even Lyra felt confused. Humans existed, yes, but they were rare, scattered, and known for nothing. The galaxy barely remembered them. They were considered the smallest, weakest species that contributed nothing to war or science. Why would they assign her him? Jace stood still, his eyes lowered, offering a respectful nod as if he didn't hear the laughter, as if he didn't care. His silence made him seem even smaller. Lyra tried to speak to him, asking, "Have you been trained for field missions?" He simply replied, "I follow orders." His voice was soft, controlled, emotionless. She felt irritation spark inside her. How was she supposed to prove herself with a quiet nobody shadowing her? But orders were orders. And the fleet soon descended through the storm-filled skies of Virex 9, the ship shaking as lightning cracked across the clouds. Lyra gripped her seat, adrenaline rushing through her veins, while Jace sat beside her completely calm, eyes closed, breathing slow, like none of this mattered. As the dropship landed with a heavy thud, the doors opened to reveal a dark, humid jungle filled with strange cries and distant roars. Everyone stepped out cautiously, weapons raised. Lyra's heart pounded as she looked around at the towering trees and claw marks carved into stone. She had seen holos of predators before, but this felt different, real, alive, dangerous. The air itself felt heavy with threat. The scanning team moved forward, sweeping the area with advanced sensors, searching for life signs. But the scanners flickered strangely, glitching as if something powerful interfered with them. One soldier cursed, "These readings don't make sense." Every apex life form disappeared at once. Everyone froze. Apex creatures didn't disappear. They hunted. They stalked. They ruled. Lyra stepped carefully, trying to stay calm. She noticed Jace walking behind her, hands empty, no weapon, no armor upgrade, just silent steps. She almost told him to stay closer, to be careful, to stop wandering. But before she could speak, a thunderous roar exploded through the jungle, shaking the ground and rattling their bones. Soldiers raised weapons instantly. A giant shadow moved between the trees, Massive claws, glowing eyes, rows of razor teeth. One of the apex creatures. A beast known to tear armored vehicles apart. The team froze, fear scraping at their throats, ready for the creature to charge. But it didn't. The beast stepped into the clearing and suddenly stopped. Its eyes widened. Its muscles trembled. The creature slowly backed away, growling low, as if afraid. Soldiers stared in disbelief. Apex predators never retreated. Never. Commander Ryan barked. "What is it doing?" No one answered. Then Lyra noticed something that made her skin tingle. The creature wasn't retreating from the soldiers. It wasn't staring at the commander. It wasn't reacting to their weapons. It was staring at Jace. Jace stood still, calm, looking back at the creature. His expression didn't change. No fear, no shock, just quiet eyes. And the apex beast lowered its head, as if bowing. The soldiers gasped. Someone whispered, "That's impossible." Another stuttered, "These creatures attack everything." Lyra's heart hammered as she stared at Jace. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, hadn't lifted a hand. And yet the deadliest predator on the planet stepped away from him. Slowly, carefully, respectfully. Lyra felt her breath catch. Was this a coincidence? Impossible. The beast turned and vanished into the trees. Silence followed. Heavy, thick, unreal. The team stood frozen, staring at Jace like they had never seen him before. Then Commander Ryan barked, trying to hide his fear. "Move forward. Do not break formation." They pushed deeper into the jungle, scanning, searching, terrified. But something even stranger happened. Every time a growl echoed, every time a shadow moved, every time a predator appeared, it didn't attack. It backed away. It circled the team only to retreat when Jace stepped near. It was like his presence alone changed the air. Lyra watched him closely now. His calmness wasn't normal. His breathing never sped up. His eyes never showed fear. He walked like he'd been here before, like he knew the rhythm of the jungle, like he was listening to something no one else could hear. At one point, a massive winged apex swooped down, blowing wind across the squad, soldiers screaming and firing blindly. But the beast froze mid-charge when it saw Jace, its wings folding as it drifted backward into the sky, fleeing like prey. The laughter from earlier was gone. Now, the soldiers whispered nervously, "What is he? How is this happening? Humans aren't special." But Lyra wasn't laughing. She felt her stomach twist with something unfamiliar. Fear mixed with curiosity. She approached Jace quietly and asked, "Did you do something?" He shook his head slightly. "No," she frowned. "Why are they avoiding you?" He paused. His eyes met hers for the first time, calm and deep, and he simply said, "They know what I am." The words sent a chill through her spine. Know what he was? He was just a human apprentice, or so she thought. His tone wasn't bragging or dramatic. It was quiet, factual, almost sad, as if the truth was heavy. Before she could ask more, the ground shook violently. A roar louder than thunder tore through the forest. The apex alpha, the king of predators, the largest and deadliest creature on the planet. Soldiers screamed, "Formation! Formation!" Trees splintered as the giant creature stepped into view. Towering, horned, its jaws dripping with venom. It charged, earth trembling beneath its massive steps. Weapons fired uselessly. Lyra felt pure terror flood her body. The creature was unstoppable. It would destroy them. But then Jace stepped forward. No weapon. No armor. Just a calm, steady breath. The creature skidded to a halt, claws digging into the dirt. Its body shook violently. Its eyes locked onto Jace. And slowly, impossibly, it lowered itself to the ground, bowing. The apex king bowed to the human. The entire squad froze, mouths open, hearts pounding. Lyra stared at Jace, her voice trapped in her throat, because in that moment she understood something that made her blood run cold. He wasn't weak. He wasn't useless. He wasn't forgotten. Something ancient inside these predators recognized him, and the apex creatures, rulers of death, stepped back from a human. The mystery wasn't just beginning, it was rewriting everything the galaxy thought it knew, and Princess Lyra, trembling in awe and fear, realized one truth she could not escape. Jace wasn't a nobody. He was something the galaxy should have never underestimated. And whatever he was, began with the jungle holding its breath, the air thick and heavy like the world itself was afraid to move, and Princess Lyra stood frozen where she was, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears, because the image of the Apex King bowing to Jace replayed in her mind again and again like a nightmare she couldn't wake from, or maybe a truth she wasn't ready to accept. Soldiers whispered in shaky voices behind her, their fear leaking through every word. That thing bowed, it bowed. Humans can't do that. What is he? No one dared speak loudly, as if raising their voice might break whatever invisible force had just kept them alive. Commander Ryan tried to act strong, barking, "Move! Regroup!" But even his voice cracked, betraying his fear. He kept glancing at Jace, like he was staring at a bomb that could explode at any moment. The Apex King, the largest predator on Virex 9, had vanished into the shadows, but its retreat left a cold truth behind. Everything they thought they knew about humans was wrong. Lyra couldn't stop shaking. Her breath came short and fast, and for the first time since becoming part of the royal fleet, she didn't care about proving herself. She cared about understanding what she had just seen. She turned toward Jace slowly, afraid to break whatever strange calm surrounded him. He stood a few steps away, his posture relaxed, his hands by his sides, as if bowing monsters were normal, as if nothing unusual had happened. His calmness made her chest tighten painfully. She whispered, voice trembling, How did you do that?" Jace didn't look at her. He just stared into the dark trees, his expression unreadable, and said quietly, "I didn't do anything." His answer was too simple, too empty, too calm. It scared her more than the roar of the Apex King. Because if he wasn't trying, then what would happen if he did? The squad moved slowly through the jungle again, but everything felt different now. The soldiers no longer walked confidently. They clung to each other, eyes darting around, jumping at every sound. Even the commander stayed closer to the group. His bravado melted into silent caution. Lyra walked near Jace, not because she trusted him, but because she couldn't deny the truth. Wherever he stood, predators stepped back. Her steps felt heavy, her armor suddenly suffocating, and she realized something she never thought she would feel on a mission. She wanted to go home. But she also knew there was no going back, not until she solved this mystery tearing at her mind. The scanner team tried again to track predator movement, but the screens glitched worse than before, static crackling, life signs flickering. One technician whispered, "It's like they refuse to be tracked." Another added shakily, "Or like something bigger is controlling them." Lyra's eyes shifted toward Jace, her stomach twisting. Was it him? Was he somehow controlling these creatures? The thought felt insane. Humans were nothing special, weak bodies, short lifespans, low ranking in every galactic record. But she couldn't deny what she saw. The Apex King didn't attack. It bowed. Not to the commander. Not to the fleet. To Jace. They reached a wide ravine where tangled vines hung over a deep drop. The path was narrow and dangerous. One soldier stepped forward to scan the ground, but before he could take a second step, a shadow moved in the ravine. A massive predator climbing the wall with claws like blades. Panic exploded. Apex! Incoming! Weapons raised. Feet scrambled. Heartbeats spiked. The creature lunged upward, snarling, jaws wide, ready to tear the soldier apart. But halfway through its leap, the predator froze. It wasn't looking at the soldier. Its eyes locked onto Jace. Its body trembled violently, claws digging into the stone. Slowly, painfully, like fighting an invisible force, the apex creature lowered itself, flattening against the ravine wall, head bowing toward the ground before slinking backward, disappearing into darkness as if fleeing from a higher king. Silence spread like ice. Not a single soldier breathed. Lyra stared at Jace, her throat tight with fear and confusion. This wasn't luck. This wasn't coincidence. This was something deeper, older, bigger than anything she'd ever been taught. She finally forced herself to speak. her voice barely a whisper. "Why are they scared of you?" Jace's eyes flickered. Not with anger, not with pride, but with something sad, heavy, almost painful. He whispered, "They're not scared of me." Lyra felt a chill crawl up her spine. "Then what are they scared of?" His answer was so quiet she almost didn't hear it. "What came before me?" The words hit her like a punch. What came before him? She opened her mouth to ask. But before she could, the communicator crackled violently. "High predator density detected. Thousands. Moving toward your position." Soldiers screamed. The commander cursed. Fear exploded through the group. They spun around as the trees shook, the ground rumbling like thunder, roars filling the air from every direction. Dark shapes closed in between the trees. Apex predators, hundreds of them, circling, surrounding, closing the trap. Weapons lifted. Hands shook. Death hovered over them like a shadow. Lyra's heart raced until she thought it would burst. They were going to die. All of them. This was the end. But something strange happened. None of the predators attacked. They formed a ring, wide, tight, unbroken, trapping the squad in the center. Their bodies trembled. Their heads lowered. Their eyes stared at only one person. Jace. Lyra gasped, her breath breaking. The predators weren't hunting. They were waiting. Jace stepped forward, slow, calm, every predator flinching back as he moved, like the very ground beneath him was sacred. Lyra's knees weakened. She could barely stand. She whispered in disbelief, "They fear you." Jace closed his eyes, pain flickering across his face for the first time, and whispered, "No, they remember." That single word, remember, sent terror rushing through her veins. Remember what? Remember who? Remember humans? Suddenly, the galaxy's greatest secret felt like it was hiding right in front of her. She stared at him, voice shaking. "Jace, what are you?" He didn't answer. He simply stepped deeper into the ring of predators. So close a single claw could end him. But they didn't move. They bowed lower. Some even backed away, trembling like prey. Princess Lyra felt her entire world break open. Humans weren't weak. Humans weren't forgotten. Humans were something the galaxy was never meant to see again, and Jace, silent, calm, ordinary Jace, was the living proof of a truth so powerful that even monsters stepped back. The mystery wasn't just growing, it was becoming dangerous, and Lyra realized with a trembling heart, she no longer feared the predators. That began with the jungle shaking like a living heartbeat, every tree trembling, every leaf quivering, every sound vibrating with a strange, silent warning, and Princess Lyra felt her legs weaken as she watched Jace stand inside that circle of apex predators. His small human frame surrounded by towering creatures with claws longer than her arms and jaws powerful enough to crush armored vehicles. Yet none of them moved, none attacked, none even breathed too loudly, as if his presence alone held them in place. The entire squad stood frozen behind Lyra, their weapons shaking in terrified hands, their eyes wide and hollow, because they all knew one truth. If these predators decided to strike, no one would survive. But instead of ripping them apart, the beasts bowed lower, lowering their massive heads toward the ground, muscles trembling, eyes locked onto Jace like he was not prey, not enemy, but something higher, something older, something they instinctively revered. Lyra's throat tightened painfully, her breath shallow as she whispered to herself, "This can't be real." Her voice cracked, full of disbelief, fear, and something she hated admitting, emotion. Because everything she'd been taught since childhood said humans were weak, harmless, irrelevant, a species so unimportant that history barely bothered to mention them. Yet here she was watching apex monsters surrender in silence before a quiet human who hadn't lifted a single weapon. Commander Ryan tried to pull himself together, barking, "Fall back! We need to evacuate. Now!" But no one moved. They couldn't. Their legs felt locked, not by force, but by sheer terror. Every soldier kept their eyes on Jace, as if taking their gaze off him might break whatever invisible barrier was keeping these beasts from tearing them apart. Lyra forced herself to step closer to him, her boots shaking against the earth, her voice small, trembling, raw. "Jace, please say something." He didn't turn. He didn't flinch. His eyes stayed closed, his breathing steady, his body impossibly calm in the middle of death. His silence scared her more than any roar ever could, because silence meant control, silence meant certainty, silence meant he wasn't reacting, he was choosing. And that made her heart ache with a strange fear she didn't know how to name. Suddenly, the alpha predator, the same massive king that bowed earlier, emerged from the treeline again, its body towering above the others, its footsteps shaking the ground, and for a split second the soldiers screamed, raising their weapons, thinking this was the moment everything would end. Lyra's heart stopped. She reached out, instinctively trying to pull Jace back, her voice breaking, "Jace, move, please." But he didn't even look at her. He took one slow step forward toward the alpha. Every predator tensed, muscles rippling, bodies shifting like they were ready to react. But instead of attacking, the alpha lowered its gigantic head so close to Jace that its breath ruffled his hair. And then, unbelievably, it backed away, one step at a time like a warrior bowing before a king. Lyra felt tears sting her eyes. It was too much, too unreal, too impossible. She grabbed her helmet and yanked it off, needing air, needing to feel something real, needing to remind herself she was alive. Her voice quivered as she whispered, "Why are they acting like this? Why do they bow? Who are you?" She wanted to scream the last question, but her voice failed, shaken by emotions she couldn't control. Jace finally opened his eyes. Not fast, not startled, but slowly, gently, like someone waking from a dream. And when he did, Lyra felt her heart skip, because his eyes weren't empty or confused. They were old. Not in age, but in depth, like they held memories stretching far beyond this lifetime. Like he carried centuries of silent knowledge. Like he wasn't just Jace, he was history. He looked at her, his gaze calm but heavy, and for the first time she saw something beneath that calm. Pain, deep and buried, like a wound he'd lived with for longer than she could imagine. He finally spoke, voice quiet, soft, but filled with a weight that made her breath tremble. "They remember us." Lyra blinked, confused and terrified, her voice cracking. "Remember who?" Jace looked at the predators, then down at his own hands, like he was afraid of them, like he didn't trust himself, and whispered, "Humans." Lyra shook her head violently. "Humans? That's impossible. Humans have no power. Humans have nothing. Humans." Her words broke because she heard how hollow they sounded, how childish, how wrong. Jace continued, his voice trembling for the first time. "Long before the galaxy learned fear, predators learned silence." Lyra didn't understand, couldn't understand, her mind spinning with confusion and terror, and she felt her heart ache because she realized how blind the galaxy had been. Humans weren't weak, they were forgotten. And forgotten didn't mean powerless. Forgotten meant hidden. Suddenly, a low rumble echoed across the jungle. Not from predators, but from engines. The fleet's backup had arrived. Dropships thundered overhead, weapons primed, alarms blaring. Loudspeakers roared. "Target the apex cluster. Prepare to fire." The soldiers on the ground turned pale. Lyra's chest tightened in horror. If the fleet fired, the predators would attack. A war would erupt. Everyone would die except maybe Jace. She didn't know why she felt that, but she did. And that terrified her even more. She screamed into her calm, "Hold fire! Do not engage!" But no one answered. The ships locked onto the predators anyway. One more second and missiles would launch. Lyra's vision blurred with panic. She lunged toward Jace, grabbing his arm, tears in her voice. "Do something! Stop them! Please!" Her fingers trembled against his sleeve, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Jace looked up at the sky, pain flickering in his eyes again, and whispered, "This is why we left." Lyra stared at him, confused, shaking, terrified. "What do you mean left?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped forward, raising one hand gently. Not toward the fleet, not toward the predators, but toward the earth itself, like he was calling to something deeper, something unseen. And in an instant, every predator lifted its head, eyes glowing, bodies straightening, like they were answering a command older than time. Lyra felt her knees weaken, her voice breaking. "Jace, what are you doing?" He whispered, heartbreakingly calm. "Stopping a mistake." The predators roared, not in rage, but in unison. A single sound that shook the sky and made every dropship freeze mid-attack, like the very air refused to let violence begin. The targeting systems glitched, missiles powered down, engines stalled. Silence fell again, crushing, suffocating, overwhelming. Jace lowered his hand slowly, breathing steady, and the predators backed away, returning to the shadows, disappearing one by one, until only the alpha remained, staring at Jace with something almost like devotion before turning and fading into the jungle. The squad stood in stunned silence, their eyes wide, their hearts shattered, their understanding of reality broken. Lyra felt tears fall down her cheeks. Not from fear, but from something deeper, something painful, something emotional she didn't know how to name. She whispered, voice shaking like glass, "Jace, what did they teach us about humans?" He looked at her with eyes full of sorrow and truth and whispered, "They taught you a lie." Lyra's breath broke, because suddenly she understood. Humans weren't prey. Humans weren't forgotten. Humans were something the galaxy feared so deeply, it buried the truth. And Jace, quiet, gentle, ordinary Jace. That began with Princess Lyra standing in the middle of a clearing that felt colder than death, her breath shaking, her hands trembling, her heart pounding so fast it hurt, because Jace's final words, "They taught you a lie," kept echoing inside her skull like a whisper she couldn't escape. A truth she wasn't ready to face, and as the last apex predator vanished into the jungle shadows, the silence left behind felt louder than any roar she'd ever heard. The soldiers around her stared at Jace like he wasn't a person, but a ghost, a weapon, a myth brought to life. Their eyes wide, their bodies stiff, every heartbeat filled with fear they didn't know how to control. Commander Ryan opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His pride, his authority, his confidence, all shattered in the presence of a quiet human who never raised his voice, never lifted a weapon, never took a single aggressive step. Lyra swallowed hard, forcing her legs to move toward him, her voice cracking as she whispered, "Jace, please, tell me what's happening." Her words weren't royal. They weren't strong. They weren't commanding. They were scared, raw, emotional, because she wasn't looking at an apprentice anymore. She was looking at a mystery wrapped in calmness, wrapped in pain, wrapped in something ancient and terrifying. Jace didn't turn. He stared into the jungle, his shoulders tense, his jaw tight, like he was listening to something far away, something only he could hear. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but heavy. This was never about the predators. Lyra blinked, confused, her heart twisting. Then what was it about? Jace's voice softened, almost breaking. It was about what they remember. She didn't understand, couldn't understand, and the not knowing felt like a knife twisting in her chest. Humans had no history of power. Humans had no place in galactic warfare. Humans were barely mentioned in Academy records, just a footnote in history. A forgotten species, a small species, a harmless species. But the way Jace spoke, it felt like the galaxy had erased something enormous, something terrifying, something deliberate. Lyra stepped closer, her voice shaky. "Jace, who taught them to bow?" He finally looked at her, and in his eyes she saw something she never expected, fear. Not fear of predators, not fear of death, fear of memory, fear of truth, fear of himself. "They didn't learn to bow," he whispered. "They survived by doing it." The words hit her like lightning. Predators, surviving humans? Surviving what? Surviving who? Lyra's throat tightened, her heartbeat racing. What did humans do to them? Jace's eyes dropped to the ground, his voice barely audible. Humans didn't hunt them for food, or sport, or war. He paused, pain flickering across his face. Humans hunted them to extinction. Lyra gasped, stumbling backward, her mind spinning, her chest squeezing, because that sentence didn't just change the story, it rewrote the universe. Humans didn't fear apex predators. Apex predators feared humans. And not because humans were strong in numbers or technology, but because a single human could walk into a jungle of monsters and walk out alone. One soldier panicked, screaming, "This is insane. Humans were weak. Humans died out because they were useless." His voice cracked in terror, not confidence. Another shouted, "He's lying. He's tricking us." But Lyra didn't shout. She couldn't, because deep inside her chest, something whispered a truth she didn't want to believe. Jace wasn't lying. He was remembering. Suddenly, Commander Ryan snapped out of his shock, fury replacing fear, his pride shattered and bleeding. He stormed forward, grabbing Jace by the collar, voice shaking with rage and humiliation. "What are you hiding? Who are you working for?" Jace didn't fight back. He didn't flinch. He just looked tired. So tired it made Lyra's heart ache. He said nothing. Ryan shook him harder, spitting, "Answer me, human!" Before Lyra could move, a low rumble echoed through the ground. Not from predators, not from ships, but from Jace. The ground itself reacted to him. Ryan froze, eyes wide, releasing his grip as the earth vibrated beneath their feet, the same way it had when the Apex King bowed. Jace closed his eyes, breathing slow, controlled, like he was forcing something down, like power was rising inside him that he didn't want. Lyra stepped forward, panic lacing her voice. "Stop! You're hurting him." But the moment she spoke, the rumbling stopped. Jace opened his eyes again, and the pain in them was so deep it felt ancient, like he'd been carrying a weight for centuries. He whispered, "I'm not here to hurt anyone." His voice broke, just slightly, but enough to make Lyra feel emotion punch through her chest. He wasn't a monster. He wasn't a weapon. He was someone drowning in a truth he'd been forced to carry alone. She asked, softer this time, "Then why are you here?" Jace hesitated, then whispered, "To make sure the galaxy never repeats what humans did." Silence hit like a blade. Lyra's breath shattered. Her knees weakened, because that sentence didn't sound like a warning to predators. It sounded like a warning to everyone, to the fleet, to the Empire, to her. Humans weren't forgotten because they were weak. They were erased because they were dangerous. Too dangerous. So powerful that even extinction might have been a choice. The comms crackled. The flagship contacted Commander Ryan. "Update required. Do we have control?" Ryan stared at Jace, his voice shaking with anger and fear. "Oh, we have control." He turned toward the soldiers, shouting, "Restrain the human. He's coming with us." Lyra's heart dropped. She stepped forward, voice cracking, "No, he saved us. You can't." But Ryan cut her off. "He's a threat. And a threat belongs in a cage." Soldiers began moving toward Jace cautiously, their hands shaking, their eyes darting, terrified of touching him. Jace didn't run, didn't resist, didn't fight. He just breathed slowly, like someone who'd expected this moment for a long, long time. Lyra felt her chest break open. She whispered, "Why aren't you fighting back?" Jace looked at her with eyes full of sorrow and said quietly, "Because fighting is how it all started." Her heart shattered. Everything she thought she knew, about humans, about power, about fear, crumbled in a single breath. Jace wasn't the danger. The truth was, and Lyra realized with a trembling soul, that the galaxy's greatest secret wasn't that humans were gone. It was that humans might someday return. And every apex predator in existence already knew what that meant. They would bow. The galaxy would break. And Jace, the quiet apprentice, was the first sign of a storm no one was ready to face. Began with a kind of silence that didn't feel empty. It felt wounded, tense, like the air itself was holding its breath in fear of what would happen next. And Princess Lyra could feel that silence digging into her skin like needles as the soldiers slowly surrounded Jace, their weapons shaking in their hands, their eyes filled with panic rather than bravery. Because even though Commander Ryan had ordered them to restrain him, none of them truly wanted to touch him. None of them wanted to risk being the one who woke whatever terrifying truth lived behind his calm human face. Jace stood completely still, his hands lowered, his shoulders relaxed, offering no violence, no resistance, no fear. And that terrified them even more, because real power didn't scream or rage or threaten. Real power stood calm while the world shook around it. Lyra's heart pounded painfully inside her chest as she watched the scene unfold, and she felt a sharp emotional panic rising inside her. The kind she had never felt even in training battles or near-death simulations, because this wasn't strategy or duty anymore. This was wrong. Deeply, painfully wrong. Her voice trembled as she stepped forward, shouting, "Stop! He hasn't done anything." But Commander Ryan snapped his head toward her, rage twisting his face, humiliation burning in his eyes. "He made apex predators bow. That is not nothing." Lyra shook her head, tears burning behind her eyes, her voice shaking. "He kept them from killing us. You're alive because of him." But Ryan pointed at Jace like he was pointing at a loaded bomb. "That's exactly why he's dangerous. Anything that can command monsters can destroy armies." His voice cracked in fear, not confidence. He wasn't acting as a leader. He was reacting as a frightened man trying to take back control of a world that no longer made sense. The soldiers edged closer, metal cuffs trembling in their hands. Jace lowered his gaze to the ground, and Lyra felt her heart twist painfully. He didn't move. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. He simply accepted what was happening, and somehow that made it worse, because she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the kind of exhaustion that didn't come from running or fighting, but from carrying a truth alone for far too long. She whispered, voice cracking, "Why won't you stop them?" Jace gently lifted his eyes to hers, and for the first time since she met him, she saw raw emotion. Sadness so deep it felt ancient. His voice broke softly, "Because if I fight, I become the thing they fear." Lyra's breath shattered in her chest. He wasn't afraid of being hurt. He was afraid of hurting others. Afraid of repeating history. Afraid of becoming the monster the galaxy painted humans to be. The soldiers finally reached him, hands trembling as they lifted the restraints. One tried to grab his wrist, but the moment his glove brushed Jace's skin, the ground gave a low, trembling pulse beneath their feet, just like before. Every soldier froze. Apex predators were gone. The jungle was quiet, but something deeper, older, responded to that touch. Something in the planet itself. The soldier ripped his hand back in terror, whispering, "He's not normal. He's not normal." Commander Ryan growled, "Do it." The same soldier forced himself forward again, lifting the cuffs. Lyra couldn't stand it anymore. She stepped between them, voice breaking, "Stop! You're hurting him. Can't you see he doesn't want this?" Ryan's face twisted with fury. "He doesn't want? This isn't about what he wants. This is about control, power, security. If he can do this, imagine what the rest of his kind could do." Lyra felt a chill crawl up her spine as she whispered, "There are no others." Ryan snapped, "You think that? Or did someone make you think that?" The implication hit her like ice. What if humans weren't extinct? What if they weren't scattered? What if they weren't weak? What if they were hiding? The soldier reached again, and this time, the cuffs clicked around Jace's wrists. Not violently, but gently, as if Jace allowed it, as if he wanted to prove he wasn't a threat. The soldiers exhaled shakily, relief flooding their faces, but Lyra felt only heartbreak. Jace stood there, bound, head lowered, shoulders heavy, looking smaller than ever, like a prisoner of a crime he didn't commit. Lyra stepped closer, her voice soft and trembling. "Did humans really drive predators to extinction?" Jace didn't look up. His voice cracked. "Yes." She swallowed hard, fighting tears. "Why?" His answer was a whisper filled with pain. "Because we couldn't control our fear or our power." She felt her chest tighten, her voice faint. "And now," Jace finally lifted his eyes, sorrow flooding through them. "Now I'm trying to stop the galaxy from becoming what we once were." Lyra's breath trembled. He wasn't their enemy. He was their warning. Before she could speak again, Ryan activated his comlink, shouting, "We have the human restrained. Prepare extraction. Secure him for transport to the Royal Labs." Lyra's eyes widened in horror. Labs, experiments, torture, dissection. Her stomach twisted violently. She whispered, "You're going to study him like an animal?" Ryan sneered. "No, we're going to use him. Imagine armies bowing like those predators did. Imagine entire planets surrendering without battle. Humanity may be extinct, but their power doesn't have to be." Lyra felt sick. This wasn't a mission anymore. It was exploitation. It was cruelty. It was repeating the same mistake humans once made, using fear to control. Jace didn't protest, didn't fight, didn't resist. He simply stood there, breathing slowly, eyes distant, like he'd already seen this future before and couldn't stop it. Lyra stepped closer, her voice breaking. "Does it hurt?" He blinked, confused. "The cuffs." She shook her head, tears finally falling. Carrying all of this alone. Jace swallowed hard, and for the first time, his voice cracked with raw emotion. Every day, that shattered her. Completely. She wanted to grab him, break the cuffs, run, protect him. But she was just a princess on her first mission, powerless against a fleet that worshipped fear more than truth. The dropship engines roared overhead, landing nearby, ramp lowering, soldiers tensing. Jace turned his head slightly toward Lyra, his voice barely a whisper. "Don't hate them. They're scared." Lyra's tears fell faster, her voice quivering. "And you?" He closed his eyes, his voice hollow. "I'm tired." Those two words stabbed straight into her chest, because she could feel the truth in them. He wasn't afraid of death or pain or captivity. He was afraid of history repeating itself as soldiers led him toward the ship, the cuffs glowing faintly against his skin. Lyra stood there, shaking, her heart screaming, because she knew with painful clarity that once they took him away, everything would change. The fleet, the Royal Empire, the galaxy, they weren't just capturing a human. They were capturing a storm, and deep inside her trembling soul, Princess Lyra understood one terrifying truth. They thought they were controlling him, but they were awakening something the galaxy wasn't ready for, and once awakened, began with the metallic hiss of the dropship doors closing. A cold, final sound that felt like a prison locking shut around every heartbeat in the clearing, and Princess Lyra stood frozen in place as Jace was guided up the ramp in. Glowing cuffs, each step he took feeling heavier, quieter, more painful than the last. Like he wasn't being led away by soldiers, but by history itself dragging him back into a nightmare he had never escaped. The engines roared, kicking up dust and leaves around them, but Lyra barely noticed. All she could see was Jace's back. Small, still, heartbreakingly calm. Like someone who had already accepted his fate long before this moment ever arrived. Her chest ached so hard it felt like something inside her was breaking. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't thinking about rank or duty or reputation. She was thinking about him. A quiet human who never begged, never threatened, never lashed out. Who only ever tried to protect everyone around him, even when they treated him like nothing. Commander Ryan barked orders with a shaking voice. "Secure the area. Prepare to lift off in 90 seconds. But Lyra heard the fear buried beneath his authority. The desperation of a man who thought capturing Jace meant capturing power. The soldiers nodded stiffly, but they didn't celebrate. They didn't cheer. They didn't even meet each other's eyes. Because deep down, they knew they weren't escorting a prisoner. They were escorting something the galaxy had spent centuries trying to forget. Something the galaxy was terrified to remember. Lyra took a shaky step toward the dropship, her voice barely a whisper, "Jace." But the wind and engines swallowed her words. She wasn't even sure he heard her. Her throat tightened painfully as she remembered the look in his eyes. Tired, resigned, hurting. And she felt guilt flood her chest like ice. She had stood there. She had watched. She had done nothing. And that realization crushed her more than any failure ever had. She whispered to herself, "I should have stopped them. I should have tried." Her hands trembled. Her eyes burned. She felt like she was drowning in regret. Up on the ramp, Jace paused, not turning fully, just lifting his head slightly, like he sensed her pain even without looking. And for a second, his eyes met hers through the swirling dust. His expression was soft, gentle, almost apologetic, and it shattered her completely. Because instead of blaming her, instead of resenting her, instead of hating her for letting him be taken, his eyes said something else. It's okay. It's not your fault. And somehow, that kindness hurt worse than hate ever could. Before she could move, the ground trembled beneath her boots. Not violently like before, but subtly, deeply, like a sleeping beast shifting in its dreams. The soldiers stiffened, eyes widening, weapons raising instinctively. Someone yelled, "Seismic activity!" Another voice shouted, "Scanners malfunctioning again." The jungle grew eerily still, silent in a way that wasn't natural, like every creature was listening, waiting, watching. Lyra's heart climbed into her throat. She stared at the tree line, expecting predators to emerge, but nothing moved. No roars, no shadows, just an overwhelming, suffocating quiet. The kind of quiet that comes before storms. Then, one by one, tiny lights flickered on Jace's cuffs. The metal pulsed with a strange, deep glow, like the restraints were reacting to something unseen. The soldier holding his arm flinched, pulling back in panic. "What's happening to the restraints?" Ryan snapped. "They're fine. Keep moving." But even he sounded unsure. Fear laced every syllable. Lyra stepped closer, her pulse racing. "Jace, are you?" But before she could finish, the ship's instruments crackled with static, alarms blaring, lights flickering on and off. A technician's voice came through the comm, shaking with panic. "Sir, all systems are glitching. We're losing control." Ryan cursed, slamming his fist against the doorframe. "Impossible. This planet is clear of threats." But Lyra knew better. The threat wasn't the planet. It was everything the planet remembered. Jace didn't move, didn't speak, but something changed in the air around him. It felt heavier, charged, ancient, like the atmosphere itself recognized him. Lyra felt a chill crawl down her spine. She whispered, "The predators weren't afraid of you. They were afraid of what you represent." Jace lowered his gaze, his voice soft, breaking, "I never wanted this." She took another step, desperation cracking through her voice. "Then tell us the truth. What are humans, really?" His shoulders tensed, like the question tore open a wound he'd spent years trying to close. His voice trembled. "We weren't born Apex. We became Apex. Because fear changes things." He paused, eyes distant, full of pain. "Fear turned us into something the galaxy couldn't control. So we left, before we destroyed more than predators." Lyra felt her knees weaken. "You abandoned the galaxy?" Jace swallowed hard. "We abandoned ourselves." Before she could respond, the entire jungle erupted, not in sound, but in movement. Thousands of eyes, glowing, watching, appeared between the trees. Apex creatures of every shape and size. Not roaring, not attacking, just standing, surrounding, waiting. The soldiers screamed, weapons rising shakily, but Lyra understood something they didn't. They weren't here to stop the fleet. They were here for Jace. Commander Ryan panicked, shouting, "Pilot, take off now." The engines screamed, the ship lifted inches off the ground, but then the predators all bowed. In the same instant, and the ship fell back down. Not because they attacked, but because the planet itself refused to let Jace leave. The scanners flickered. A single message appeared across every screen, every visor, every device in the fleet. "Do not remove what the galaxy once feared." Lyra felt her blood turn cold. Soldiers stared in horror. Ryan stumbled back, voice shaking. This isn't possible." Jace finally spoke. Not loud, not angry, but with a heartbreaking calm that made every soul tremble. "They're not protecting themselves." He lifted his eyes. "They're protecting the galaxy from us." Silence crushed the clearing. Lyra felt tears spill down her cheeks, her voice breaking open. "Jace, what happened to humans? His answer was a whisper full of sorrow. We became too good at surviving. She stepped closer, her voice shaking. Can we fix it? Jace closed his eyes, pain tearing through his expression. That's why I came back. Lyra's breath stopped. Jace hadn't been sent, but he chose to return. And as the cuffs flickered again, straining against some invisible force, Lyra realized with a trembling heart, the fleet thought they had captured him, but in reality, they had just triggered the beginning of something the galaxy had tried to bury forever, something unstoppable. Began with fear so thick it felt like a weight on every chest, a fear that didn't come from claws or teeth or roars but from truth, silent and suffocating, and Princess Lyra felt that truth crushing her ribs as she stared at Jace standing in the center of a world that bowed to him. A quiet human in glowing restraints while thousands of apex predators lowered their heads like soldiers awaiting orders, and for the first time since the mission began, Lyra understood something deeper than terror. This wasn't luck, this wasn't coincidence, this wasn't mystery anymore. This was history waking up, a history the galaxy buried for a reason. The dropship shook as the engines tried again to lift, metal groaning, alarms flashing, but the ship refused to leave the ground. Every system glitching like the planet itself was holding it down, and Commander Ryan screamed in frustration, slamming buttons, shouting at the pilot, "Get us in the air! Do you hear me? We are not staying here." But the pilot's voice came back broken, scared, shaking. "Sir, the systems are locking themselves. Something's overriding us." Ryan turned, eyes wild with panic, and pointed at Jace. "It's him! It has to be him." Soldiers backed away like he was poisonous, but Lyra could see the truth in Jace's face. He wasn't doing anything, he wasn't fighting, he wasn't resisting. He was just standing there, breathing slow, looking heartbreakingly tired, as if the planet was acting on its own, as if the predators were acting on instinct older than technology, older than memory, older than fear itself. Lyra stepped forward, heart-pounding voice trembling. "Jace, please, tell us what's happening." And Jace lifted his eyes with a pain so raw it made her chest ache, his voice quiet like a confession. "They think I'm a warning." Lyra froze, shaking. "A warning for what?" His eyes flickered with sorrow. "For what humans used to be." The words hit her hard and cold, because suddenly she wasn't looking at a captive. She was looking at a survivor of something terrifying, something bigger than him, something bigger than all of them. Before she could speak again, a deep roar echoed across the sky. Not from predators, but from engines as massive shadows descended through the clouds. The royal flagship and 2 destroyers arriving, their cannons armed, their lights blazing, and Ryan's fear twisted into triumph as he yelled, "Reinforcements! Good! We'll take him by force if we have to." Lyra's heart dropped. She whispered, "No, no, no, this is wrong." Because she could see the command channel lighting up with orders from the capital. Words cold and merciless. Human asset confirmed. Retrieve at all costs. Lethal force authorized. Jace closed his eyes, shoulders lowering like the weight of an entire galaxy had just settled on his back, and Lyra felt something inside her break because she saw the fear he had been hiding. Not fear of death, not fear of pain, but fear of what would happen if the galaxy tried to use him. Fear of chains stronger than cuffs. Fear of becoming the weapon history remembered humans to be. The flagship sent out drones, hundreds of them, mechanical wings slicing through the air, weapons humming, scanning, calculating, targeting, and the predators shifted, muscles tensing, claws digging into the ground, growls rising like a storm building in their throats. The soldiers screamed, "They're going to attack!" But Lyra shook her head, whispering, "No, they're afraid. Afraid not of drones, but of what drones represented: war, domination, the beginning of the same cycle that once drove humans to become apex above all apex." Jace took a slow breath and whispered to himself, not to the soldiers, not to Lyra, but like speaking to a memory, "This is how it started last time." Lyra grabbed his arm, tears stinging her eyes. "Last time? What last time?" He looked at her with a sadness so deep it felt ancient. "When we turned fear into power." The drones beeped, weapons activated, targeting the predators first. Standard protocol: always eliminate the biggest threat. But Lyra knew, in the deepest part of her trembling heart, they were targeting the wrong thing. Jace whispered, "Don't let them fire." But Ryan roared over him, "All units, prepare to eliminate the creatures." The skies lit with charging energy. Lyra screamed, "Stop!" But she was too small, too powerless, too late. And then, everything stopped. The drones froze midair, engines whining but motionless, like invisible hands held them still. The predators froze too, not from fear, but from command. And every screen, visor, and comm unit flickered with static before displaying a single ancient symbol. One Lyra had never seen, but one Jace recognized instantly. His face went pale, his voice breaking, "Oh no! They're awake." Lyra grabbed his cuffs, desperate, terrified. "Who's awake? Who are you talking about?" Jace swallowed hard, his breath shaking. Humans weren't the only ones who left. The ground trembled beneath them, but not like before. This tremor felt rhythmic, controlled, like footsteps of something massive, something mechanical, something sentient. Lyra's heart raced, her voice barely forming. "You mean, there are more like you?" Jace shook his head with a trembling breath. "Not like me. Worse." The sky cracked open as a colossal shape emerged from the clouds. An ancient ship, black and silent, older than the royal fleet, older than any empire. Its hull marked with the same symbol on the screens. The predators all lowered their bodies, trembling, not in fear of Jace, but in fear of what was arriving. Ryan stared at the ship, voice breaking. What is that?" Jace whispered. "A relic from when humans ruled the dark." Lyra felt tears spill down her cheeks. Her voice shredded. "Jace, what did your people do?" He looked at her with eyes full of grief, whispering, "We built things meant to protect us. Then we became what they protected us from." The ancient ship descended silently, no weapons drawn, no signals sent, just a presence heavy enough to crush the air. And Lyra understood one devastating truth. They weren't looking at a weapon. They were looking at a memory, a consequence, a reminder. And then, for the first time, Jace's voice cracked wide open with raw emotion. "I came back to stop this." Lyra stepped closer, her hand trembling as it brushed his cuffed wrist. "Then we'll stop it together." Jace looked at her, truly looked at her, and something fragile flickered in his eyes. Hope. But then he shook his head, voice breaking. "They won't listen to you. They won't listen to anyone. They only understand one thing." Lyra whispered, "What?" His answer was a single word, sharp as a blade, heavy as a tear: survival. The ancient ship's lights ignited, the predators bowed lower, the drones powered down, the fleet panicked, and Lyra finally understood the real nightmare. The galaxy wasn't afraid of what humans had been. It was afraid of what humans still could become. It began in a breath that felt too thin for life, too fragile to hold the weight of everything collapsing at once. Because as the ancient black ship descended from the clouds, silent, massive, and marked with the symbol that froze every screen, the entire world seemed to fall into a single heartbeat of terror. Princess Lyra felt her knees weaken, her vision blur. Her chest tightened like invisible hands were squeezing the air out of her lungs. Because this wasn't just a ship. It was history returning. It was a forgotten truth stepping out of the dark. It was the past refusing to stay buried. Around her, soldiers screamed orders, weapons rattled, alarms wailed, and the fleet above scrambled in panic. But none of it mattered, because the predators, thousands of them, bowed even lower, trembling like prey before a god. And Jace stood perfectly still, glowing cuffs tightening around his wrists. His eyes locked on the descending ship with a look Lyra had never seen on him before. Pure heartbreak. Not fear. Not anger. Heartbreak. Like he was watching a wound reopen from centuries ago. Commander Ryan staggered backward, his voice cracking into panic. "Fire! Fire on that ship!" But the fleet didn't respond. Their systems flickered, stalled, locked. Every weapon frozen in disobedience. The flagship's captain shouted through the comm, terrified. "We're not controlling our own systems. Something else is overriding us." The destroyer's cannons powered down. Drones dropped from the sky like dead metal, and every soldier's weapon shut off with a soft, chilling click. The galaxy's machines obeyed someone or something else. Lyra turned to Jace, her voice trembling like shattered glass. What is that ship? Who's on it? Jace swallowed hard, pain tightening his voice. Not who. What? She shook her head, tears burning her eyes. What does that mean? His gaze dropped to the cuffs around his wrists, glowing brighter now, almost reacting to the ship like a signal being answered. His voice was a whisper full of grief. It's one of ours. Lyra's blood went cold. Humans? Jace nodded slowly, tears gathering in his eyes. Not living humans. Not flesh. Not people. His breath shook, his face twisting with pain. Machines we built to protect us, when we became too dangerous to protect ourselves. Lyra's heart shattered. Humans didn't just leave. They left guardians. They left weapons. They left sentinels. And one had finally awakened. The ancient ship touched down with a soundless thrum, the ground pulsing beneath their feet, and a massive doorway opened black, endless, humming with power. A figure emerged. Not a creature, not a soldier, but a towering humanoid machine, armored with obsidian plating, eyes glowing with cold blue light, moving with deliberate, terrifying grace. The predators retreated instantly, claws scraping dirt, bodies shaking, bowing so low their heads nearly touched the ground. Every soldier dropped into stunned silence. Commander Ryan stumbled backward, his voice collapsing. What is that thing? Jace closed his eyes, pain flooding his expression. A failsafe. The machine stepped forward, scanning the clearing, its gaze passing over soldiers, predators, ships, until it stopped on Jace. Its voice echoed through the jungle, metallic and ancient. Calm yet merciless. Identity confirmed. Human genetic signature detected. A shiver ripped through Lyra's spine. The machine continued. Primary protocol. Retrieve human asset. Neutralize interference. Ryan panicked, grabbing a fallen weapon even though it was powerless, shouting, No! He belongs to the Empire. The machine didn't even turn toward him. Instead, it took another step toward Jace, the ground shaking under its weight. Lyra rushed in front of Jace, arms spread, voice breaking. Stop! He's not a threat. The machine paused, not from understanding, but from calculation, and its cold voice replied, Human entity contains potential for extinction-level escalation. Retrieval is mandatory. Lyra's breath stopped. Extinction level. Mandatory. This wasn't rescue. This was containment. The ship hadn't come to save Jace. Came to lock him away. Forever. Jace lowered his head, his voice cracking. I knew they'd find me. I just didn't think it would be this soon. Lyra grabbed his arm desperately, tears rushing down her cheeks. Jace, no, please. You said you came back to fix things. You can't fix anything locked away. His voice trembled, soft and broken. Maybe locking me away as the fix. Lyra shook her head violently, emotion tearing through her. You are not a weapon. You saved us. You stopped the predators. You didn't hurt anyone. Jace looked at her with eyes full of sorrow so deep it drowned her. That's what scares them. Humans learned how to choose peace, after learning how to destroy everything else. His breath hitched. They think the galaxy is safer if we never return. The machine raised an arm, energy swirling, the cuffs on Jace's wrists unlocking. Not to free him, but to transfer him under its control. The predators whimpered, bowing even lower. The fleet trembled, powerless. Lyra grabbed Jace's hand, voice breaking open. Fight it! Please, Jace. Don't go with them. Jace looked at her like she was the first kindness he'd seen in centuries, his voice shaking. If I fight, the fail-safes escalate. More ships will wake. And then the galaxy won't survive us. Lyra's knees weakened. The truth stabbed through her. Jace wasn't giving up. He was sacrificing himself. To save everyone. To save her. He whispered, voice raw. You told me once you wanted to prove yourself. You already did. Tears streamed down her face. Don't say goodbye. His voice softened, breaking. I'm not. I'm saying thank you. The machine extended a beam of light around him. The world held its breath. The predators cried out. Lyra screamed his name, Jace! In that instant, he turned back for one final look. Eyes full of quiet strength, pain, and something fragile. Hope. And as the beam pulled him toward the ship, his final whisper drifted through the trembling air. Don't let the galaxy forget who we were meant to be. The doors closed. The ship lifted. The predators rose, and Princess Lyra fell to her knees, tears hitting the earth, realizing the most terrifying truth of all. The galaxy hadn't feared the return of humans because of what they could destroy, it feared their return because of what they might redeem, and somewhere beyond the clouds, carried into darkness, a lone human disappeared into the past he never escaped, leaving behind a storm that was only just beginning.